Imagine, you're told your younger sister ran away from boarding school. Years passed, decades even. And you'd never quite let go of that hope that she's out there, somewhere. Then, one day you get a call, and they've identified a Jane Doe, a murder victim from 1975, and it's your sister. That's what happened to Marianne Newsome. And her quest for answers is the heart of our deep dive today.
It's a story that really highlights the power of DNA in solving these cold cases, but also the enduring pain of unanswered questions for families. You've given us a true crime podcast detailing the murder of Patricia Newsome, full of twists and turns, kept me on the edge of my seat.
So let's start back in August of 1975. A truck driver, who also happened to be a volunteer state trooper, was driving behind a discount department store, East Haven, Connecticut, when he spotted something strange in a drainage ditch.
It's almost like fate intervened.
Right.
That this specific person, someone with a trained eye,
Well,
was the one to make that discovery.
exactly. He thought he saw a body wrapped in canvas, so we called it in. When the police arrived, they quickly realized they were dealing with a homicide. The body was meticulously wrapped in this canvas tarp, tied with twine and copper wire, and then further secured with black rubber.
That level of care in concealing the body speaks volumes, doesn't it? It suggests a degree of premeditation and perhaps even an attempt to delay the discovery and decomposition of the body.
Inside, they found the remains of a young woman, badly decomposed. She was bound and gagged with a plastic bag over her head. The medical examiner determined she had been suffocated, but there was no sign of sexual assault and absolutely no personal belongings. To help identify her, she was a Jane Doe.
This lack of identification is a major hurdle in cold cases, like starting a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Back then, investigators relied heavily on fingerprints and dental records, which were often incomplete or unreliable.
They did get fingerprints and dental records from Jane Doe, but despite nationwide searches, nothing came back. For years, she remained unidentified.
But that doesn't mean the investigation stalled. Early on, investigators received a tip from a prison inmate who claimed his friend Jason had confessed to killing a girl he picked up hitchhiking. He even described details like the wrapping of the body and the location near a shopping center, which was eerily accurate.
Chillingly accurate, right. But Jason, a convicted bank robber, was already in prison at the time of the murder, and he was paralyzed from the waist down. Due to a previous encounter with police, could he have physically committed this crime alone?
That's the question that plagued investigators. The possibility of an accomplice had to be considered, which widens the scope of the investigation considerably.
Then a few months later, another tip came in from someone claiming their friend Clyde had heard Jason confessing to the murder. This time there was a potential motive attached. Jason supposedly said the victim was going to testify against him.
The conflicting narratives between these two tips underscore the complexities of relying on jailhouse informants. It raises questions about their motivations and the reliability of their information.
Unfortunately, Clyde refused to cooperate with the police, leaving them with more questions than answers. Despite their best efforts, they couldn't connect Jason or anyone else to the murder definitively. So the case went cold.
And this is where things could have ended. Another unsolved case. Another Jane Doe lost to time. But then, almost a decade later, a chance encounter breathed new life into the investigation.
In 1984, the wife of an East Haven police lieutenant was reading People magazine and came across an article about a murder in Maine. The details, the way the victim was killed, it was all too similar to their Jane Doe case.
Talk about a stroke of luck. This accidental discovery completely changed the trajectory of the investigation. The article focused on a woman named Samantha Glenner, who had been convicted of the murder in Maine. And guess what?
Glenner had lived in East Haven, just minutes from where Tricia's body was found.
The similarities in the cases are just too striking to ignore. Both victims were bound, gagged, and had a plastic bag over their head. The methods were almost identical.
It felt like a major break in the case. They tracked down Glenner in prison and questioned them about the East Haven murder. But Glenner was evasive and ultimately denied any involvement. Frustratingly, this new lead went nowhere, and the case went cold again for almost 30 years.
30 years, can you imagine? That's a long time for a case to remain unsolved. But it also speaks to the evolution of forensic science. New technologies emerged, and sometimes that's all it takes to reopen a cold case.
And that's exactly what happened in 2020 with a new generation of detectives on the case. And the original case files destroyed in a flood. They decided to try a more drastic approach, exhuming Jane Doe's body for DNA testing.
Exhumations are complex
Hmm.
and often require navigating legal hurdles and logistical challenges. In this case, it was further complicated by the fact that the cemetery was abandoned and the records were a mess.
Their first attempt to locate the grave
Yeah.
led them to the wrong spot. They unearthed a young boy's remains. It was heartbreaking and a major setback.
A grim reminder that these investigations are not always straightforward. They involve real people, real emotions, and sometimes unexpected setbacks.
But the detectives were determined. They brought in ground-penetrating radar, a technology that allows them to see beneath the ground to pinpoint the location of the grave. Their second attempt was successful.
Ground-penetrating radar has become an invaluable tool in these types of investigations. It's non-invasive and can help locate buried objects, including graves, without disturbing the site.
And finally, in April of 2023, the DNA results came back. Jane Doe was identified as Patricia Newsome, a young woman who had disappeared in 1974.
This is where the story takes an even more poignant turn. While investigators were meticulously piecing together the puzzle of Jane Doe's identity, Tricia's sister Marianne had been conducting her own parallel investigation.
Marianne had always believed Tricia was out there somewhere. She never gave up hope. Imagine the shock, the mixture of relief and grief when she received that call. Her sister had been found, but not the way she had hoped. Not alive.
It's a gut-wrenching realization, years of wondering, hoping, and then finally getting an answer. That brings both closure and a whole new set of questions.
And that's just the beginning of this complex story. Stay with us as we delve deeper into Tricia's life, her family's secrets, and the renewed search for her killer. Marianne's search for Tricia is a story in itself. She always felt something wasn't right about the official story, that Tricia had run away from boarding school.
That intuition, that feeling in your gut, that something's amiss, it's a powerful force, especially for family members of missing persons.
And it turns out Marianne had good reason to doubt the story, she was told. According to Marianne, their stepmother, Mimi, was incredibly abusive, both physically and emotionally. She erased any trace of their mother from their lives and seemed to focus her cruelty on Tricia in particular.
That kind of trauma can have a profound impact on a child. It's possible Tricia's disappearance wasn't a case of running away, but rather an act of desperation, an escape from a dangerous environment.
And the boarding school itself is shrouded in mystery. Marianne has vague memories, but no concrete details. Mimi claims she can't remember the name of the school, and investigators haven't been able to find any records. It's almost as if this boarding school never existed.
That's a huge red flag. Was this a real boarding school or a fabrication? A way to cover up something more sinister? It's a question that begs for further investigation.
Now with Tricia's identity confirmed, and more details about her life coming to light, those early leads pointing to Jason, the inmate who supposedly confessed, suddenly become much more intriguing.
It's fascinating how seemingly unrelated pieces of information can suddenly converge and create a whole new perspective on a case.
Remember, one of the informants claimed Jason knew specific details about the murder, like the wrapping and the location. And with Tricia's identity confirmed, investigators learned that she had lived in New Jersey, not far from where Jason had spent time.
And Jason had a history of violence against women. It's certainly within the realm of possibility that their paths crossed, especially considering they both frequented the same areas.
But we have to be cautious about jumping to conclusions. Circumstantial evidence can be compelling, but it's not always conclusive.
Exactly. It's like putting together a puzzle. You might have pieces that seem to fit, but without the full picture, it's difficult to know. For sure.
But there's another layer to this puzzle that we can't ignore. The possible involvement of Samantha Glenner, their modus operandi, in the main murder, was strikingly similar to how Tricia was killed.
And that's where things get really interesting. We have two potential suspects, both with connections to the case, but no concrete evidence linking either of them directly to the crime.
And to make matters more complicated, both Jason and Glenner are deceased, which eliminates the possibility of obtaining confessions or further information directly from them.
It's a frustrating situation for investigators to be so close to uncovering the truth, yet still facing a wall of silence.
But here's another twist. Remember how I mentioned that Glenner and Jason were both paroled on the same day in 1974? Well, while it could be a coincidence, it also opens up the possibility that their paths crossed during that time.
It's a possibility that can't be ignored. Perhaps Jason, with his limited mobility, needed an accomplice. And Glenner, with their demonstrated capacity for violence, Fit the bill.
It's a chilling thought, but it fits with the limited evidence we have. It's like we're looking at a spider web with Tricia at the center and all these threads leading outward, connecting her to potential suspects and motives.
And some of those threads are still dangling. Remember that unnamed friend Tricia supposedly ran away with? If they existed, their account of events could be crucial in understanding Tricia's final days.
It's a missing piece of the puzzle that investigators are still trying to find. Was this friend real or another fabrication? If they were real, were they involved in Tricia's disappearance?
And then there's the detail about William Shrow, an inmate serving time for multiple murders, who mentioned an unidentified body found behind Bradley's department store during a 1983 interview.
It's unclear if he was referring to Tricia, but it's certainly worth exploring. It highlights the importance of communication and collaboration between different law enforcement agencies. Sometimes what might seem like an insignificant detail to one department could be the missing link in another case.
It also underscores how human error and missed connections can hinder investigations. Even in the digital age, we have access to more information than ever before, but it's still up to individuals to connect the dots.
But what really stands out to you in all of this? What aspect of the case do you find most compelling?
For me, it's Marian's unwavering dedication to finding her sister, that deep familial bond, the refusal to let go of hope. It's both inspiring and heartbreaking.
I agree. And it makes you think about the ripple effects of these cases, the impact of childhood trauma, the weight of family secrets, and the long road to finding answers, even when those answers are painful.
It's a sobering reminder that justice isn't always swift, and sometimes the truth remains elusive.
But even with these lingering questions, Tricia's story has resonated with people across the country. It's a testament to the power of storytelling and the importance of giving voice to the voiceless. So where does this leave us? We've uncovered a lot about Tricia's case, but it feels like we're still missing that crucial piece of the puzzle.
It's like we've assembled the border of a jigsaw puzzle, but that center remains a jumble of pieces. We can see the outline of the truth, but the full picture remains obscured.
We have these tantalizing connections to Jason and Glenner, both with motives and methods that align with the crime. But without concrete evidence, it's all just speculation.
And that's the frustrating reality of many cold cases. They often leave us with more questions than answers, highlighting the limitations of our investigative tools and the elusiveness of truth.
But even with these lingering questions, Tricia's story offers some valuable lessons.
Absolutely. It reminds us of the importance of listening to that inner voice, that intuition that something isn't right. Marianne's persistent search for her sister is a powerful example of that.
Yeah. It also highlights the crucial role that genetic genealogy is playing in solving cold cases.
Yeah.
Imagine how many more families could find closure, how many more victims could finally be identified, and their stories told if more people uploaded their DNA profiles to databases like GE Match.
It's a simple act that can have a profound impact. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there listening to this deep dive right now holds the key to unlocking this mystery.
Perhaps they knew Tricia. Maybe they crossed paths with Jason or Glenner, or maybe they have information about that elusive boarding school. Any detail, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem, could be the breakthrough investigators need.
So if you have any information at all, please don't hesitate to contact the East Haven Police Department. Your tip could be the missing piece that brings justice for Tricia and peace for her family.
And as we conclude this deep dive, there's one final question that I keep coming back to. What if the key to solving this murder lies in uncovering the truth about that mysterious boarding school?
Was it a real place? If so, what happened to Tricia during her time there? Was it a safe haven? Or was it a place of abuse and neglect?
These questions may never be definitively answered, but they're worth pondering as you delve deeper into this case on your own. Sometimes the most important discoveries are made, not by finding solutions, but by asking the right questions.
We hope this deep dive has given you new insights into the complexities of cold cases and the profound impact they have on the families left behind.
Remember, Tricia's story is a reminder that every victim deserves justice. Every family deserves answers. And even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles, hope and perseverance can prevail. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.